and the contrast with the pipes before and the whistle binkies to begin with. I mean, the whole musical component of it is of this. What a great thing to be doing on a Sunday afternoon. It's I should have said, the praise of Ben Doran, the poem we were reading from, was, I think, one of the great poems of world literature. It's just one of those most wonderful poems that nothing else in the world is quite like it. And you can compare it with any of the great poems of the world, and it's up there. It's absolutely there. But it has a musical structure, and the musical component of this afternoon seems to be absolutely central and crucial. Duncan Ban MacIntyre, as he said, is illiterate, and often that word would be used disparagingly. Quite the opposite. This man had the most phenomenal memory, far more than I would imagine almost anybody alive in the world today. He composed all of his poetry, all of his songs, and held them in his memory until they were written down. And the praise of Ben Doran is constructed in the form of a classical bagpipe pibroch. What you heard at the opening is the urla, the ground theme. These are the main themes of the poem. And then each part of it is a variation on these themes until it comes to the culmination, as was hinted in the extracts that I read, that we read, that the deer is killed by the hunter, by the huntsman. Not for sport, for food, for the family. It's a poem about the ecology of the world, about the balance in which things should be held, and that's one of the reasons why it's such a great poem. But I'm not answering your questions, Peter, because I haven't given you a chance to ask me any yet.
I think I'll just go and sit down. There's an autopilot. That's what happens when you lecture in universities for years. Captive audiences. Right. The first question actually too, Alan, was what drew you as a non-Gaelic speaker to Duncan Ban and this work? I think you pretty well answered that.
There's a personal aspect to it as well, because my name, the word Riach, is a Gaelic word, and it has meaning in Gaelic, but I don't have Gaelic. When I was translating and turning the Gaelic version into my own English language version, I did my homework and I used the dictionaries and I studied the Gaelic, and I talked to Gaelic scholars and to Gaelic poets. So I studied it. But I'm not fluent with Gaelic, and I couldn't read it as fluently as more I beautifully did. So there was a curiosity about the language and approaching the language. And approaching this great poet and his contemporary, Alistair MacMeister Alistair, who wrote the great poem of the Berlin of Clanranald. Alistair was on the other side, he was on the Jacobite side, and as he said, Duncan Ban was on the Hanoverian side reluctantly, in some respects. But I was drawn to these poems because in 1977 I was fortunate enough to meet Hugh McDermott, the great poet Hugh McDermott. And in the same year I met the great Gaelic poet Sorry MacLean. And both of them had said to me that these are poems that must be read. Scottish literature undervalued in the world compared to English literature or American literature. Study it. If you're interested in it, and if you care about it, study it. You know, McDermott has a poem where he says it takes great love of it deeply to read the configuration of a land. In other words, if you don't care about it, don't bother. But if you do care about it, study it. So that was really the first kind of directive, prompt to me personally, with that personal curiosity about the language of my name and this study of literature and poetry, which really has driven me all the way through to study these poems, and this poem in particular, which I'd read in as many translations as I could. It went in early, and it went in deep, and it stayed there until I could make my own version of it. So that was really my own response to it.
Okay, so I mentioned earlier on that Duncan was an exceptional man living in exceptional times. I'm just wondering what you think about that. Was he exceptional, and were the times exceptional?
Yes.
Next question.
He was an exceptional man, hugely. I mean, he's one of the great poets. All great poets are exceptional. But at the same time, he's writing in a Gaelic community, in a social community of interconnectedness. So as I said, it's not out there hunting a deer for sport. It's food for the pot, and the reference to the fishing and the grass, the foliage, the flora and the fauna of Bendoran, this mountain. It's an understanding of ecological balance. This is one of the great prophetic poems about ecology. You know, if the representatives at COP26 had read this poem properly, the planet would not be in the trouble it is now. So this is the serious import of this poem. So its exceptional ability to articulate a Gaelic social world of interconnectedness and balance is really, truly distinctive. But it's also part of a social world which, since the middle of the 18th century, has been eroded, hurt. Violence has been done upon it. And we're trying to correct that in our smaller degree. So yes, that's the second part of your question. These were exceptional times. Culloden, you could say 1715, the rising and the suppression of the rising at that point was really the beginning of the end. The Culloden, in a sense, was the end of the end. And that ever since then, we've been trying to come to terms and oppose the opposition to the health that's embodied in these poems of this man's work. But he was a family man as well.
He was. 11 children. Married an old, and she was a very faithful wife to him, I think well over 50 years. Travelled with him, he was part of the work as well as the family itself, but raised these children. I have to say, Duncan must have been missing in action when a lot of this was happening. So a remarkable woman, and a very fair, an intellectual, actually, to a certain extent, but a very driven, driven in her care for the language, her husband, her children. Two of the children actually are buried in Clacton Desert, at the church along the road there. Don't tell me where, because I've got great difficulty in working out exactly where they are buried, because the names of one was a girl, one was a boy, and the girl's name was obviously married and altered. But it's a challenge, and we will find out where they are. I think we're getting the cutthroat sign from the side here.
Better draw to an end.
Yes. You've covered a lot of ground.
Well, if you wanted a one-sentence conclusion to the character of Duncan Ban, I love the idea that he was said. It's said that he Duncan Ban MacIntyre was of a peaceable and happy-go-lucky disposition, and mild-mannered as a rule, but merciless in retaliation for insult and uncharitable to his opponents.
I'm going to read you 4 short verses from the song on Glenorchy. Oh, it is in Glenorchy, it were sweet to be today, sitting in a wondrous church in a pew carved elegantly, listening to all was told us, in his voice that pleasing was, while he told the Bible story and burden coming to pass. The warm and sheltered little dell where crops right well will grow, and where the little patches are in which the seed they sow. Branching corn will ripen there as pleasing white as curd, and rank, abundant, juicy, heavy, fruitful, thick, full yield. It were heartsome there in winter, fun at weddings could be got, the smooth stream of the piping for its close with weary not, the sound of the strings of fiddlers would play off the movement's choice, and their own sweet carol by girls of the truest, sweetest voice. Found a salmon in fresh water, ascending every stream, the hill birds in great numbers, black cock in the thousandth team, the small dove scraping, the wee fawns, the roebuck race, the glen where are the falls.